Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. We live in a world where it's not as much accepted or maybe as popular, or we don't get the same preferred treatment as Christians that we once got. I remember growing up in the 50s and 60s, it was kind of assumed that everybody went to church somewhere, and when you ask somebody where they went to church, they could always tell you. In this day and age in our country, it's kind of assumed you don't go to church, and actually being a part of a Christian congregation, it may put you in a minority. Even though most people would claim they're Christians, most people aren't in church on Sunday mornings. There are parts of the world where persecution of Christians is physical and violent. Here in this country, it's probably more political, or more putting pressure on people, or more emotional, maybe, persecution. During the time of the writing of the epistles in the first century of Christianity, persecution of Christians was very, very real. We've been looking at the epistles, and we're up to 2 Thessalonians. We did 1 Thessalonians last week. We're up to 2 Thessalonians, and the persecution that Christians experienced in Thessalonica was very real. It came from two quarters. From number one, it came from the Jews. People who ought to have understood that Jesus fulfilled the prophecies instead looked at this Christian church, this fledgling church in Thessalonica, as a cult or a sect, and they persecuted it. And Paul warns them in Thessalonians that there's more to come, more persecution to come, and that persecution would come from the Roman government itself. Even though at the time of this writing, it may not have been intense from the Roman government, it would get intense eventually. You might remember that in 1 Thessalonians, one of the issues was about those who had died, and the question they asked Paul to answer is, what happens to our loved ones who are already dead? When Jesus comes again, they're going to miss it. And Paul says, no, they're not going to miss it. When Christ comes again, they'll be raised, and they'll meet him also. Well, 2 Thessalonians leads to some questions, too, about that second coming. And if you go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, he addresses the coming of Christ. He says, now concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our assembling to meet him, we beg you, brethren, not to be quickly shaken in mind or excited either by spirit or by word or by letter purporting to be from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Apparently there's a rumor running around the Thessalonian church that Jesus came back and y'all missed it. That's kind of hard for us to imagine. Paul says, no, you didn't miss it. You're going to know. In fact, he says there's some things coming down the pike, persecution-wise, that are going to be difficult before that day comes. And in verse 3 he says, let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. It's not Paul that uses the term the Antichrist. That's John's term. This may be Paul's way of describing that same thing. And I would guess those first century Christians maybe saw this fulfilled in Nero. But throughout history, we have seen those who have set themselves up as God and persecuted Christians mercilessly in the process. We've seen many sons of lawlessness, and generation after generation has identified people in their generation or people within their history that they think fills that role. But Paul is telling these people, you did not miss the second coming. In fact, things are going to get tough before Jesus comes back again. He also addresses toward the end of the letter another problem that may have come out of 1 Thessalonians when he told them that Christ would come again. Apparently, some are just sitting around waiting for him to come. And Paul addresses that issue of idleness at the end of his letter and says, no. You don't sit there and wait for Jesus to come. You get busy. You be productive. You be useful. You do what God's called you to do. So that theme of the second coming, that the second coming is real, it's imminent in a sense. You didn't miss it, but don't sit around and do nothing waiting for it, weaves its way through this letter of encouragement to the Christians at Thessalonica. And it weaves its way through our lives today, too, as we live in the here and now, recognizing that Jesus is coming again, but not sitting around doing nothing, waiting for that event, but ready for that event, but doing what he's called us to do in this world, to be his sons and daughters, forgiven by him, redeemed by him, and waiting for him to come take us home again.